This whole Assassin's Creed Shadows situation is stupid, insulting, and very possibly your own fault. It's good content though, so let's talk about it. Assassin's Creed Shadows is an upcoming action role-playing video game developed by Ubisoft set to release later this year. Ubisoft did what fans have been asking for as long as the Assassin's Creed series has existed, by making a game which takes place in feudal Japan. Then Ubisoft did something seemingly unprecedented that made the collective gamers lose their minds and chose for one of the two playable main characters, and the only male playable character, to be a black historical individual, Yasuke. Now, as you'd expect, everyone has had something to say about this. Many people didn't really give a shit. Many were upset because Ubisoft seemingly steered away from their own traditional approach in order to do some seemingly bizarre woke pandering, and many were, in a not very understandable fashion unfortunately, upset because they're not only genuinely racist and sexist, but because they're also genuinely fucking stupid. First, right from the get-go, let's make something clear. There are a lot of valid criticisms to be thrown at Ubisoft for a lot of somewhat tone-deaf decisions that they made along the way. For starters, this is, I believe, the first Assassin's Creed that moves away from the franchise tradition of having the playable character be a non-historical figure native to the given time period and location. Altair from the first game was Syrian, and the game took place in the modern-day Israel, Palestine, and Syria. Ezio from the second game was Italian, and the game took place in Italy. Alexos and Cassandra were Greek and ran around Greece. Ivor was Norwegian, and the game is about the Viking raids on England. There are more games and more characters, but you understand the general point that I'm making. It's not particularly complicated. If the game takes place in X, then the character you play is a non-historical figure from the same geographic area. This is not the case for Yasuke in Assassin's Creed Shadows, who was not only a real-life, bona fide, documented historical figure, but he was from Africa and served in Japan as a retainer to Oda Nobunaga. Asking why Ubisoft made this change doesn't make you racist. It's okay to question stuff that big corpos do, particularly in today's political environment. On top of this, you have a lot of worrying tidbits of information here and there that paint a picture that kind of warrants your skepticism. Assassin's Creed Shadows history consultant, Sachi Smith-Hori, was hired after they had already decided Yasuke will be the main character, which indicates at the very least the potential for that decision having been done haphazardly with sort of questionable motivations. And then on top of that, the history expert that they did choose, right, Sachi, wrote a book by the name of Tales of Idolized Boys, Male-to-Male Love in Medieval Japanese Narratives. Now, by itself, that isn't actually really that big of a deal. Researching weird shit can be fun, but I can see how hearing about that might make you think that there's a certain ideological agenda at play here, especially if you have a certain ideological agenda in your brain to begin with. Now, I personally would rather wait for the full story, but I understand the skepticism at play here. You can think of stuff like Giles Armstrong, the senior writer for AC Shadows, having said in the past that there are too many games with white men as the only playable characters. You can think of stuff like IGN making a big deal about Resident Evil 5 because of the optics of a white agent killing a bunch of ethnic zombies is bad, but seems to be full of praise for Yasuke going around killing ethnic Asians. Then you have the whole fucking mess that keeps on trending every other week nowadays with companies like Sweet Baby Inc., who the lead writer of Assassin's Creed Shadows, Alyssa Ralph, appears to follow on Twitter. I understand how, through half-reading headlines, and if we're being honest, doing a bit of jumping to conclusions, you can entertain a picture of the wokes taking over the world. Now, that's not quite what's going on here, but I understand at the very least why you'd think that. Then on top of all of that, you have a weirdly tone-deaf decision that is somehow simultaneously offensive to gamers across the political spectrum, which is kind of endearing actually, by completely underplaying the issue of Asian erasure in Western media through stuff like the choice of main character, as well as the earlier mentioned writers pretending like what people are asking for is a white male character, when that doesn't seem to be the request. On top of that, giving you a black playable character who'll go through most of the game just butchering Asians left and right can make some people raise their eyebrows, right? I get where you're coming from. And then finally, just deciding that when the aforementioned black character, Yasuke, goes into combat in feudal Japan, a fucking rap-style beat will play in the background. Because, you know, you can't have a black person be involved in a video game as the main character without rap music somewhere in there. And yeah, that's kind of weird, mate. It's just a bizarre decision. Again, you're not racist for questioning the motivations here. There's a valid intersectional lens to be explored here that, in my honest opinion, is worth a second look. The super duper important thing to note here, however, is that we're questioning an unfinished product based on snippets released predominantly to judge the mood and attract feedback of a video game whose detailed story isn't out yet. And I mean, who knows, maybe Yasuke in the in-game storyline is a Templar turned assassin. I mean, that'd tie nicely with the broader story of Assassin's Creed. Maybe there's more background music that we just haven't heard yet. Maybe there are reasonable explanations to everything I just mentioned. So, understanding this, unless you're an actual 65 IQ troglodyte, you should be able to wrap your head around how any of the earlier mentioned points aren't an excuse to just be racist, right? So, let's move on to the imbeciles who didn't get that memo. We're starting off today with Papa Uwu X, who frankly is more or less harmless actually. He just kind of enjoys his racist dog whistles, which you'll find plenty of if you check his Twitter replies. It's sort of a growth strategy on Twitter to latch onto bigger posts and farm impressions by saying what you know more or less the core audience of the original poster will agree with. Here is an example of him using George Floyd as a vector of attack against Yasuke because George Floyd was black and Yasuke is black and therefore relevant, I guess? Here is another example of him just doing the exact same thing, and I know of at least 2 other cases of him having done this, although in hindsight I was not smart enough to save those because I didn't quite think I'll be bringing him up, but you know, I figured why not. Here is another example of him just attacking the entirety of the LGBT movement, still over all of this Assassin's Creed Shadow stuff, you know, for no particular fucking reason at all. Now, I'll be honest, because I did mention earlier that this dude is more or less harmless, the sole reason why I'm bringing him up is really only just because I personally find it really funny when someone seemingly has these really strong feelings about a given topic, but when you extend to him a challenge to debate these feelings in real time in a way that doesn't let him rewrite his own tweet 16 times before hitting the post button, where he actually has to think on his feet and accept the challenge, he turns into a ginormous fucking pussy. These are the same folks who will defend an open marketplace of ideas, by the way. He literally created his own Twitter community where they can share their W's, of course based on ratios and general sort of like-dislike proportion, but we won't defend any of these ideas face-to-face, proverbially speaking of course because we're both VTubers. Oh, and here's a tweet of him saying that all of the Assassin's Creed Shadows defenders are all bots. If they're all bots, mate, and I'm guessing you'd consider me to be one of those bots based on this segment of the video, why are you so afraid of confrontation? It's always a good indication of how well-founded your axioms are when you're too much of a limp dick to accept a challenge when faced with one. But you're happy to chat shit on Twitter, aren't you? To give Papa Uwu a breather because he gets confused if you talk too fast, here is another, somewhat dumber example of the Assassin's Creed outrage, and it revolves around this promo material, specifically this bit down here, where it says become a legendary samurai as the charismatic samurai Yasuke, strike your foes with brutal precision and power, uses combat-oriented skills to attack, block, parry and deflect your enemies, master the vast arsenal of weapons at your disposal, featuring the katana, kanbo, bow, naginata and more. And specifically this part is what people seem to be fucking confused about, which is to free Japan from its oppressors. Now, this fivehead decided to tweet out, Assassin's Creed Shadow, lead writer, a white woman and intersectional feminist, which you know is bad because remember, feminism bad, right? It's very important to keep that at the back of your mind as we go through this. Decided to add to it, oh no, here goes against the same oppressive victim narrative with a skull emoji, which I always find these kinds of posts particularly fascinating because if you know anything about Assassin's Creed, and bear in mind I've only played like 2 or 3 of these games, so like you don't even have to be really that deep into it to understand, the oppressors in the context of Assassin's Creed are the Templars. We're not talking about like, this isn't the dub that you think it is, you absolute muppet. It's such a performative outrage when you can tell, based on tweets like this, that half of the people complaining about this don't fucking play any of these games to begin with. Here's a better, or worse, example, depending on how you look at it, of the classic gamer sexism, where someone photoshopped Alyssa's Twitter bio with the vectors of attack here being that she's overweight. Because gamers, right, famously known for caring about their BMI and looking like the statues depicting Greek gods, cannot wrap their minds around the concept of someone overweight making a decent game. God forbid if it's a woman on top of all of those things, because I mean, being overweight is one thing, right? But being a woman, we can't have that here. And funnily enough, this energy isn't something that you almost ever see whenever a fat bloke makes a shit game. This is reserved specifically for women, because remember, women are objects, right? And they're not supposed to do stuff, they're supposed to just look pretty and fuckable, especially in the eyes of disgusting slobs whose rancid dick cheese serves as a repulsion weapon to every chick in a 25-mile radius. That being said, that was mostly me and my fifis, you'll have to forgive me. I like women, what can I say? Here and now, we'll finally move on to maybe the most egregious example of today, which is Grums, an individual so inherently pathetic that he decided to name himself with a word that sounds like an unsatisfactory bowel movement. Now, unfortunately, Grums deleted all of his original posts about this, but I was lucky enough to find someone who took screenshots. I will link the thread in the description if you want to go through it later. Grums, desperate to feed the narrative that Japanese people are in shambles over Yasuke being a protagonist in the next AC game, tried to prop up a famous Japanese art director he thought was agreeing with him. 20 minutes later, the said art director contradicted him. He deleted everything. Now, if you go through his post, his Twitter history is absolutely full of Assassin's Creed Shadows hate. Which is funny because there are enough of people out there that genuinely dislike Yasuke to a point where you'd think taking an L this fat is impossible, and yet here he is. Now, I've seen people saying that this dude is 56 years old, in which case fucking oof, my brother in Christ. I don't think I need to comment much further. 56 years old. Before we move on to the little cherry on top that I prepared, I wanted to take a few moments to offer a sort of alternative perspective. I'm not Japanese, so talking about it might not convince enough of you, so let me share something of Japanese people who appear not to hate Yasuke at all. I found this post right here, written in Japanese by presumably a Japanese person, that goes over their surprise at sort of the pushback that Yasuke has received in America, given the fact that he already has been showcased in quite a lot of sort of Japanese media, ranging from stuff like video games to manga to TV shows. There are also a lot of comments here that are going over how sort of surprised they are as well at all of the, well, let's just call it racism, sort of, that can be seen regarding this in the West. And there are obviously some comments as well that are explaining that they're not super happy about it, but you know, you don't have to take my word for it. This will also be linked in the description down below. Here is another post with Yoshiki Okamoto defending AC Shadows, which at the very least should already be making it somewhat clear to you that this is not some grand case of all of Japan rising up together against the evil West that's trying to rewrite their history, but rather a contentious issue where I'm sure that a lot of Japanese people are not going to be fine with this. However, there seems to be a very large chunk, if not an equally large chunk, or maybe an even bigger chunk, that genuinely do not mind this at all. Because at the end of the day, it's a video game. It's not about reality. Assassin's Creed hasn't been about reality in a while. And here is a very interesting TikTok that goes into this whole retainer versus samurai bollocks that we can watch together.
英語では胡椒が retainer に訳されてるってことなんですかね。ちょっとごめんなさい。日本人なんでわかんないんですけど、とりあえず辞書引いとく。安家の位に関する記述って残っていなくって、胡椒あるいは武士のどちらかだと思われてるんですよね。どっちも侍です。ありがとうございました。
Now, this whole retainer debacle is particularly stupid because from the reading that I've done, it seems to be reasonably clear that the vast majority of retainers were in fact samurai. Now, not all of them, granted, but given Yasuke's position in Nobunaga's court, him being a samurai would make sense. Even if he wasn't and he was just a retainer, he seems to have been treated as samurais were treated. I don't know, I'm far from a historian, but I have a feeling, just a tiny little feeling, that this is not about historical accuracy, it's about his skin color. Because where was this energy for Tom Cruise's Last Samurai? Where was this energy for John Blackthorne in Shogun? And historical accuracy, is that really the angle that we're going for here? With Assassin's Creed, no less? This might come as a surprise, but broski, just wait until you find out that Native Americans didn't actually find a magical alien artifact that gave them visions of Washington becoming the tyrannical king of America. I want to see your face when you realize that Greece wasn't giving out flaming steeds to assist your battle with a fucking Cyclops. And this is a particularly tough pill to swallow, but I don't think that Leonardo da Vinci actually was making weapons for a young assassin named Ezio. Assassin's Creed hasn't been historically accurate for a very long time, nor does it intend to be beyond certain allusions to real historical characters/events. And a nice little cherry on top for us to finish with a sort of funny bang is a petition aiming at ending AC Shadows before it's even released. Now look, this isn't going to work because that's not how petitions work. That's not how capitalism works. That's not how any of this works. This is really, at the end of the day, just offended people trying to cancel a thing they dislike, which in this particular case is funny because it's coming from the cancel culture bad crowd. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because of people like Kenji Yamamoto, with his Twitter handle being @samurai_Kenji, a Japanese historian who was outed for his actual real name being Garrett and him being non-Japanese and not a historian. Now, I don't mean to discredit the entire petition. Well, bit of a lie, kind of do actually. Look, the genuinely offended Japanese people signing this are going to be far and few in between of hundreds, if not thousands, of Bobs and Jeremys who want to protect Japan from the evil Western influence that they don't really understand. It's a bit like how every time you stumble into a white supremacist on Twitter, there's like a 65% chance it's someone browner than you expected with a surname like Fuentes. If there are genuinely offended Japanese people speaking out about this, we ought to listen to why. I've mentioned myself earlier quite a few valid reasons for why you might want to be skeptical of Assassin's Creed Shadows. However, not like this. Not from these people. Not from these accounts. These are Muppets, and if you listen to them, you become a Muppet by osmosis. Do not be the Muppet, okay? You don't wanna. No one wants to be a Muppet. So then, you might wonder, why are you to blame? Because remember, I've said at the very beginning that that's right, you might be to blame. Do you know why? Because you keep fucking pre-ordering these video games, you absolute cumrag. A week after this entire debacle went down, someone posted this right here, which is a screenshot of people pre-ordering the gold edition more frequently than they buy the limited edition. And that's just for PlayStation 5. That's just from, I believe this is Amazon, at least it looks like Amazon. Now granted, until the game is actually released and Ubisoft has to share the actual numbers of sales, we won't know anything for certain, but we've seen this before. A game is announced, a shitloads of people complain about a number of things, sometimes more valid, sometimes less valid, and then the game sells like hotcake anyway, and then we're left standing with our fucking thumbs up our asses because once again, this really bad product that was supposed to be really shit didn't only sell incredibly well, but also actually isn't really as shit as was initially claimed. Now, at the end of the day, to me, this whole situation is relatively simple to understand. Just vote with your wallet. You like what's going on and you like these kinds of video games and you want to play a game where you're a samurai in feudal Japan that is sort of in the veil of Assassin's Creed, then buy the game. You don't want to? Then don't buy the game. Just at the very least, have basic human decency and wait for it to be released and buy it then, okay? Pre-orders are just messy and they send out every single wrong message. But hey, people are going to pre-order regardless. My video isn't going to change that. My opinion isn't going to change that. So just do what you will. I will still be here next week to poke fun at more fucking idiots that I bump into on the internet. That will be it for today's video. If you enjoyed me yapping, tell others about it. If you didn't, tell me about it in the description down below. Like, subscribe, do all of that good shit. And as always, special thanks to my supporters. I'll see you all again very soon.